In this lesson, the first thing we're going to do is actually go over an activity that you were going to do in class today. And it's just to help you see the relationship between a model and the square root and the length of the side. So when we look at this, this will represent, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There are 7 rows of 7. So what that's really representing is 49 squares. It's representing the square root of that. The square root is basically, this is a square. And so the root would be the length of the sides. So when we're talking about the square root of 49, we're really asking for the side length of that square, which would be 7. So another example is the square root of 64. That would be 8, because 8 times 8 makes 64. So when we're talking about a square for that, we are going to make a square that has 8 rows of 8. So 64 squares within that square. So again, the verbal description is 8 rows of 8. So if I ever ask you what's the square root of 64, you're going to tell me 8. 10 rows of 10 squares. So this is basically a 100 grid. Takes a long time to draw these, actually. So there's my 100 squares. The side length is 10, and so this represents the square root of 100. 9, well, that is the square root of 81. So I'm drawing something that has 9 rows. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, not pretty, but whatever. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So that's 9 times 9. That's 81 squares. So that is 9 rows of 9. And again, so the square root of 81 is going to equal 9. That's what these models are supposed to show you. So sometimes they'll actually use circles to do this instead. So this particular model has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there are 36 squares here. So it's being used to represent the square root of 36. David is correct in this case because the side length is 6. Casey left the square root on. The square root of 6 we're actually going to talk about a little bit more tomorrow, but you cannot find a number times a number that will give you 6. So that does not have a whole number answer, so she should have taken that square root off. Okay? So when an integer is multiplied by itself, it is called a perfect square. And we've been dealing with these for quite a while anyways, whenever we talked about squares with order of operations. So for example, 3 squared means 3 times 3, which is 9. So you are responsible for memorizing the most common perfect squares. Usually people have at least 1 to 12 already memorized, but there are some special ones too, like 13, 15 is commonly used, 16, 20, 30, etc. Those are the most commonly used ones, but I usually recommend that you memorize 1 to 30, and then your special ones after that, like 40 squared, 50 squared, 60 squared, etc. So we're going to practice a little bit. We're going to write each expression in standard form, and then simplify if necessary. So standard form means 9 times 9. And we're going to simplify that to make it 81. This one, this is a very important one. This one means, because it's touching the parenthesis right there, it means everything in the parenthesis gets written twice. So it's -7 times -7, which gives you positive 49. This is different than if you had this. This one actually means -1 times 7 squared. And this is a very important concept that you understand because you're going to be dealing with variables next, and it gets a little tricky in that situation. So it's important to know that the square only goes with this, and the negative just really means -1 times this. So if we think about it in terms of order of operations, this has to come first because it's an exponent, and then the multiplication can happen. So this problem is -49. This problem is +49. So again, super, super, super important that you know the difference between those two. So this one's going to be 1.1 times 1.1. So 1.1 times 1.1, that's really just 11 times 11, which is 121. But there should be 2 decimal places in my answer. This one means 1/2 times 1/2, which remember when we multiply fractions, we multiply the top, multiply the bottom, and simplify if necessary. Okay? Then we're going to skip that one for now. A square kitchen tile has sides measuring 12 inches. What is the amount of space each tile covers? So this is like our area grid. It's saying that we have 12 rows here. That might not be 12, but you get the idea. And 12 rows here. So what is the area? Well, 12 times 12. So 144 inches squared. It is area. So a square root of a number is a number n. A square root of a number n is a number m, which when multiplied by itself equals n. Way too much. Okay, so this means that 8 squared equals 8 times 8, and that's 64. So the square root of 64 is 8. And think back to those area models that we talked about earlier. When you're talking about the square root, you're talking about the side length. You're looking for what number did I multiply by itself to give me that 64. Now, I also want you to think about this case. -8 times -8 is a negative times a negative is a positive. So the square root of 64 could really equal +8 or -8. Typically, we will only be thinking of the positive one until you get to solving equations with this stuff. And we call that, another word for that is a principal square root. So I'm only going to look for the principal square root in these. So that's going to be 10. Yes, -10 is an answer, but I'm only looking for the principal square root right now. 625, this is why it's helpful to know some of those special ones. 25 times 25 gives you 625. 169, that's 13. If you didn't know what the square root of 625 was, you didn't know how many squares that was, you would have to guess and check. That's why memorization is kind of helpful on these. Which model represents 9 squared? Well, 9 squared is 81, so you're looking for the one that has 81 squares and has a side length of 9. So this is the model that matches. Historic Route 66 from Chicago to Los Angeles is known as the Main Street of America. If the area of Route 66 sign measures 576, and that is square inches, we want to know what are the dimensions of the sign. So this is also one of those funky numbers that it's helpful if you have 1 to 30 memorized, because you may not know what times what equals 576. So again, you're looking for what times what gives you 576. In other words, you're really looking for the side length, and we can find that by finding the square root. I happen to know, because I have them memorized, that that is 24. So the dimensions of the sign are 24 inches by 24 inches. All right, so that's all for this particular notes. Please complete the assignment in your workbook.